Here we have some evidence about these vampires, these Western vampires, how they love to use Africans as test subjects. Now, I'm already upset because I understand what black bodies are used for and how these vampires love to have access to black bodies. Now, I'm going to read some evidence from the BMJ, right? The British Medical Journal. Controversial African vaccine trial, and it is likened to Tuskegee, is cancelled, but US funders insist it will continue. So they are bullies. So this sovereign nation is putting an end to this study, but the bullies are insisting to continue with it because what? They like access to black bodies. They like to use black bodies for experiments. Let's get into what the BMJ is saying. The fate of a controversial US-funded trial of a neonatal hepatitis B vaccine remains unclear, with different authorities claiming it is cancelled, suspended, or going ahead. The study aimed to look for any negative effects of the vaccine and would have been led by two Danish researchers, Peter Hebe and Christine Stabell-Ben, whose work has been cited by U.S. Health Secretary and vaccine skeptic Robert F. Kennedy. However, the African CDC says it has now been cancelled. The organization said this was because it exploited shortages of vaccine in Guinea-Bissau, the West African country where the trial was to be conducted, to find a study population in whom the shot normally given at birth was delayed to 6 weeks. Despite Africa's CDC statement, the U.S. Health Department, the principal founder of the trial, told the BMJ it was proceeding. However, Guinea-Bissau health ministers has now said it is suspended pending an ethical review. So, it's not just Tuskegee, it's not just Guatemala. Here we have Guinea-Bissau in 2026. The date of this article is the 26th of January 2026. When will we learn? These people love access to black bodies. And whenever they want to try out their latest vaccine or whatever they need to test, they test it on these poor African countries. Now, Guinea-Bissau happens to be one of the poorest. And that is where they are going, right? To inject their babies. That is why I keep telling people, when it comes down to this book, Medical Apartheid, you need to read it. Every black person should have a copy. Not even one copy, 2 to 3 copies you should have for your home. And understand what happened in the past is still happening today. And when you see these people coming on in with their education, their lab coat and their smiles, they don't mean you any well. They don't like you. They only want access to black bodies. And I'm not even going to go into deep research into this hepatitis B vaccine situation in Guinea-Bissau because it's going to trigger me and I'm going to get really upset. I'm just going to leave it at the BMJ article. That's what I'm going to do. Because why is it that you have a continent that is so rich and a continent with educated people just the same, right? But yet still they stand aside and allow these things to happen. Africans in America, in Britain, in wherever they are, and they leave their continent wide open for these vampires to go on in and potentially poison the future generation. And when you say anything and you chastise these Africans, they get in their feelings. This type of thing upset me to the core, right? It upset me to the core. One thing I do not like is when people take advantage of people who are in a weaker, more desperate situation. So because they are poor, right, because their standard of living is not very good, you feel you need to take advantage of them. And then the Africans who know well, the lawyers, the doctors, the teachers, they all fled the continent. The majority of them fled the continent. So there's no one to stand guard. So they're constantly taking advantage of Africa, the land and the people. My God, these vampires. People need to understand we wrestle not with flesh and blood. Wickedness in high places. We need to pray and say glory be to the Most High.